Ross Beaty's love of rocks and nature led first to his becoming one of the most successful mining executives in Canada, and then one of the most active and generous environmental philanthropists in our province. An interesting man. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today and having this conversation. Really appreciate it.
Great pleasure.
It's interesting to look at your life story because you've been so involved with the environment one way or the other, as a geologist, as an environmentalist. Where did you get this love of nature?
Well, it really has always been in me. I have always loved hiking and skiing and camping, just being outdoors. From a very young age, my parents used to take us hiking on the North Shore when I grew up in Vancouver. And I don't know what it was. It just spoke to me. And I've just, maybe it's just like, I love getting dirty and being muddy and grubby and living in a tent and just having a small kind of world around me. I don't know what it is, but it has certainly been a passion, and it's been informed by a great love of the natural environment.
So there was never a time that you doubted what you would study at university. It was going to be geology.
Interestingly enough, I excelled in geography in high school because there was no geology class in my high school. And so I actually went into geography in university in my first year. But I took the first year geology course as part of that. And literally from the first lecture, I was hooked. And every single lecture after that I loved, and it was just an instant switch over to geology. And I haven't looked back. I wouldn't do it again differently if I had to repeat my life. It was just a wonderful vocation for me, and something I've loved, and I'd do it again. I mean, this was a job flying around in helicopters. I was 19 years old, climbing mountains, getting paid to camp, getting paid to have great campfires at night, walk all day long in the most glorious mountains in the world. In northern British Columbia. It was just wonderful. I had to pinch myself sometimes to say I was getting paid to do this.
I'm sure you remember your first find.
My first discovery was made really in the mid-'80s with my first company, and that was a gold deposit in Nevada that was really, for me, the key to a whole bunch of things that happened after that.
But walk me through that. You say it was in Nevada. Why were you in Nevada? How did you identify a place that was possible, and then you discover gold?
What happened was I discovered during the 1970s that I was really unemployable. I wasn't a good employee. I was too impatient. I wanted to work for myself. It was just this weird entrepreneurial gene that I've got in me that, thank God, not too many people have, or we would self-destruct as a society. But along the way, I started my first public company. In 1985, we took it public, and that was because in those years, it was very easy and very cheap to start public companies because we had the Vancouver Stock Exchange here. You know, this Wild West stock exchange that cost almost nothing to take a company public, and it allowed guys like me who didn't have any money to start with to put a little bit. I think I invested $3,000 in buying, cheap shares of my first company, and you could start these public companies. So I did. And in that company, we went to Nevada looking for gold, and we used a complicated Canadian exploration technique called walking. And in Nevada, in those days, most Americans typically would take their pickup trucks to the end of the road, and then they would sample along the road cuts and so on. But they wouldn't actually go into the field too much further. We did. We set up tent camps in remote areas of Nevada, and our team made a discovery of some mineralization that we staked a claim over. And then a couple of years later, we did some drilling, and bingo, we found a gold deposit that became a mine about 13 years later. And that was this big discovery we made, and it was super exciting. And, it doesn't happen very often in a geologist's career, but it was super wonderful. And for me, it was the key to actually selling that company, making my first fortune, and then going on from there. It was more easy because I actually had the capital to invest in and kind of scale up.
So what was it actually like? You're discovering some mineralization, and you're looking like, can this be? Like, really?
I'm not going to say it's as good as sex, but the drilling a drill hole that goes into the earth where you just have no idea whether you're going to find something or not. And 99% of the time you find nothing. You may be in the right place, but you're in the right place for the wrong reasons, or the wrong place for the right reasons, but you often find absolutely nothing. This is the risk of the business, that is the business of discovery. But when you have a good drill hole, you know, it's literally, I close my door, I look at the assay results, by my computer now, and I get the results. I close my door, and I have a metaphorical cigar, and I just feel wonderful because you've created wealth from nothing. And rarely, but not never, you find something that maybe a drill hole that costs $50,000, and you might find something worth $1 billion with that, or $5 billion. So it's that discovery that it's very, very, very fun, very joyous when it happens. And luckily for me, it's happened several times. It's happened a good many times in my career, which I ascribe to luck and a certain amount of preparation that creates the luck.
So you talk about yourself as being an entrepreneur right from the beginning. You've had many, many companies. So how do you take your personal values and run a mining company? Because mining companies sometimes have a reputation that are not great.
Oh, for sure. Mining has had a terrible reputation in the past because nobody cared about the environment. Nobody cared, and they did the most horrible things. They'd throw waste into rivers, waste into the ocean. It was just dreadful. But, you know, you could say the same thing about communities with sewage. And, I mean, a lot of human activities 50 years ago, 80 years ago, didn't care about the environment. Today is a very different place. Not only do executives of mining companies care, by and large, companies are required by governments to care. There are huge fines and huge investor loss if you do the wrong thing. Investors don't want to invest in companies that do the wrong things. There's tremendous focus today on so-called environmental, social, and governance matters inside the corporate world. And so you absolutely have to today. But it's not always easy because mines are, by their very nature, A, non-renewable, and B, destructive. I mean, everything humans do, one way or another, is destructive. But mines are a particular example. And you know, there's good ways to mine that are minimally destructive, or as minimal as possible, and there are bad ways to mine where you don't look after your waste, you pollute, you use too much land, you just do things the wrong way. I can say today that where we are in the public world of mining is a pretty good place, by and large. Public companies are under constant scrutiny, and they do things not just because of the scrutiny, but they do things because most of the executives in the businesses are understanding of the importance of this ESG, these ESG policies. The problems today typically arise in private companies that don't have that kind of scrutiny, or national companies in places that don't have the governance to look after their own companies and their own citizens who are doing rapacious, polluting, highly destructive activities in the mining space. And the regrettable thing is that basically it's one brush that tars the whole industry. When you have a problem in one place because of bad governance or bad operations, the whole industry gets a bad name. And that's the world we live in. It's just something you have to do as well as you can. You have to feel good about what you're doing, sleep well at night, knowing that you're looking after the environment as much as you can. You're looking after your employees and your communities to make sure they're safe and they're healthy. And ultimately, you're providing revenue for countries that you're working in to help them do their own social programs. If you can feel good about doing that, you move on.
You work internationally all the time.
For sure.
And you've been quoted as saying when you were working in West Africa, I believe it was, that it was a death-defying experience.
It was. I mean, well, I've had more near-death experiences than anybody I know. I spent 3 years in West Africa in the mid-'80s, and I got cerebral malaria, which put me in a coma for 46 hours, and luckily I came out. It's 50% fatal. I was involved in a riot there and almost lost my head when a rock flew by me and smashed the hotel window right behind me. That I was watching the riot down below me on a balcony, and somebody saw me and flying a rocket. I mean that was a near-death experience. I've had helicopter crashes, plane crashes, falling in crevasses, just one near-death experience after another, and yet here I am. So it goes to show, lucky guy.
How does your wife deal with that?
She's a doctor, actually. She's saved me from a few things on her own, but you know, it's hard for her to handle me, I would say, and stop me from doing foolish things. I still do I still have the ability to recognize risk like a 10-year-old does. In other words, he doesn't see risk, and I resolve all of that by just being lucky.
And then everything kind of changed for you in 2008. What happened?
I'd retired from my silver company as the CEO. I'd become chair, but not sort of active in management. And I thought, well, I'd like to start a new company. I'm too young to retire. I was just in my how old was I then? 56 or 57. I wanted to do something green. I wanted to do something in the resource sector, public company, the stuff that I've done all my life. But instead of mining, I wanted to build a geothermal power company using drill holes into the ground, looking for hot water that could power turbines and make electricity. And then I did that for a couple of years, and then we moved it into other clean energy space like wind, hydro, and solar power. So ultimately, that was my big thing for the next 10 years, building a clean energy company. And so renewable energy is just simply going to take over in the world in most places, perhaps not all, but in most places. Over time, you're going to see it be more and more dominant as a power source.
So let's talk about this energy crisis that everybody's talking about coming this winter, because there's a shortage of natural gas and oil. Prices are going so high. And then if you turn to renewables, places like the UK are saying, but we didn't have enough wind this year and we're going to be short. Sure.
Well, the key word there is transition. We are in the middle of an energy transition. It's going to take years to completely build out. We're right in the middle of it now. It's been going maybe for 10 or 15 years, and it's going to take another 10 or 15 years to complete.
Isn't there a danger that by jumping too quickly, which perhaps California has done, perhaps Germany has done, and now being vulnerable, that you'll get such a backlash from the community that it'll be a backlash against green, clean energy?
It's possible, Carol, but I think most of the society, particularly in Europe, certainly in Canada, growing in the U.S. The U.S. is still a complicated place, but most of the world has a realization that we absolutely must make this transition. It's critical for the existence of human beings and many other species on Earth. It's critical that we resolve our carbon pollution problem by getting rid of carbon pollution, either by putting a huge cost on it, like a carbon tax, or simply by making the transition away from carbon burning of CO2 and other greenhouse gases. We absolutely have to do it. There are many, many, many ways to make the solution happen. And so I'm optimistic that it will happen, and I see it happening every single day with revolutionary new technology. I mean, there's more innovation going on right now, pushed by things like these big issues that are happening from time to time in the energy markets of the world. That's what breeds innovation. And innovation, humans are very creative people. There are solutions, we just have to execute them. They're not free. We have to put the focus on and the money into them, but we're doing that. We are doing that. I mean, I'm right that, with our renewable energy business right now, we're producing almost 4,000 megawatts of clean energy. We're right at the front of battery technology development, hydrogen development, wind power, solar power, hydropower, all over. We're working right now in Chile, United States, Canada, and France. And it's very exciting. It's a very, very exciting thing to be in, as to be really embedded in that energy transition and living the good as well as the bad.
Well, you're certainly working in a controversial field because there are various voices, even amongst environmentalists, about carbon, for instance, how bad it is, how maybe it's not so bad, whether we should concentrate on it or not. How do you break through social media voices? How do you break through and say, listen, I believe carbon, in your case, you believe carbon is bad and we've got to do something about it. How do you convince people that you're the voice to listen to?
When you look at the science, you really have to come to the conclusion that this is a global systemic risk. Just like the loss of biodiversity is a global systemic risk to the welfare, not just of humans, but of all species on Earth. At that level, you have to do something. You have to do something personally. You have to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And that's why it's very easy for me to focus a lot of my time and energy on trying to be part of the solution, be it building a renewable energy company or being on the board of various environmental NGOs, as I am, or putting a lot of my personal wealth into environmental solutions that other people are working on. That's what I'm doing to try to accommodate these or resolve or deal with the solutions to these really serious existential problems of biodiversity loss and climate change.
Talk to me a little bit more about biodiversity loss. Where are we at?
The result of the onslaught of human activity and the scaling up of human populations up to today's 7.5 billion is that nature has been affected badly. And we've seen a lot of species that have become extinct and that are threatened with extinction. Everywhere from the jungles of Brazil to the grasslands of British Columbia, we see loss of species, and we have to do something about it because healthy ecosystems drive healthy humans. If you don't have clean air, clean water, clean soil, ultimately you're going to degrade the life for humans. We rely on other species to keep us healthy and happy, so we have to look after the other species too. And that's one thing that I'm very happy about doing. I'm trying to put all of my philanthropic energy and money into protection of the environment, preservation of biodiversity. And again, I feel optimistic that we can have solutions because the first problem is understanding that there is a problem. If we resolve that, then let's work on the solutions. And there's lots and lots of good solutions.
You've been remarkably generous with your wealth and helping all of these causes. Can you give me an example of one piece of research you're funding, for instance, on biodiversity, something that interests you?
I don't know where to start, Carol. I mean, it's not always a happy thing because you're always dealing with, species that are endangered. And even right now, the one that's giving me the most vexation is salmon. I mean, I love fishing for salmon. I've always loved salmon ever since I was a kid. And I've seen salmon populations go down and down and down in my lifetime, despite a lot of attention, a lot of work on trying to save our Pacific salmon. So it's disappointing that our efforts haven't really worked yet. But I think we do know enough about the problem. We do, I think, have some solutions that are at hand, and I'm kind of optimistic that it's maybe going to turn. But that's one that I'm most worried about. What greater good can one do but prevent a species from going extinct? Is there any greater achievement than saving a species from extinction?
What do you think of the political public policy on this issue?
All governments have to be aware of what's going on, and I think they, by and large, are, and be part of the solution. One of the big solutions that's coming, which I'm overjoyed with, is creation of more protected areas, both on land and in the ocean. If you protect an area, you protect it from economic activities that tend to degrade the natural environment. This includes mining, forestry, fishing, human infrastructure, railways, roads, that kind of thing, towns. So protected area strategies for me are a big, big part of the solution. If we can add more land that's in parks and protected areas, great. If we can add more marine areas that are protected, great too. The thing about the marine environment is nobody can see what's under the ocean. But boy, it's a beautiful, beautiful world. It's a beautiful world, and it needs protection.
One word that you used along this conversation was about consumption, and the fact that we all have a role to play here in terms of, for instance, demands for energy is because we in the population are doing more, buying more, using more, always more.
Absolutely, Carol. I mean, one of the it always amuses me to hear people criticizing, let's just say, mines or oil fields or anything, and then get in their car and drive to the store and buy a bunch of junk that they don't need and drive home and into a house that's bigger than they need and just a lifestyle that's crazy bigger than anybody in most of the world actually has. And then criticize an activity that creates the resources that they're using. So the hypocrisy in that is staggering, but humans are hypocritical people. For sure, our lifestyle today is bigger than it needs to be. And the consumption that it's resulting in is really what's driving this global pollution that's going on, not just with energy, but also with too much metal production, too much fertilizer production, too many things that are being demanded from the earth that is causing the earth to degrade. And ultimately, it's going to have a very bad consequence unless it's changed. And how does it change? We just have to realize we don't need all the junk that we're using today. We don't need the consumption lifestyle that we have today. We don't need to consume. We don't need to travel as much. We don't need to do any of this. So there is an alternative way to do things that's going to be less impactful on nature, and that's the direction I hope we go in the fullness of time. You know, the best way to resolve this energy crisis is use less energy. Not make more energy from renewable sources, but actually use less energy.
Using your life as an example, and Bowen Island as an example, tell me how you've changed your life in various ways.
Well, I have the great fortune of living with a woman who's I've been married to for 41 years and had 5 kids with, who is an anti-consumer. So she's grounded in very minimal consumption anyway. She uses her clothes until they wear out. She buys, we're lucky because we have a big garden and we grow most of our food in the garden. We keep chickens, I keep bees. I've always done that. And we have, I would say, a very low consumption lifestyle.
What do you hope your legacy is?
Well, I never really think too much about my legacy. I'm too busy just running around doing things. I don't really know, Carol, about legacy per se. I guess my environmental foundation is one thing that will be a legacy of mine. I'm especially proud that my daughter, my oldest daughter, is running the foundation right now, is executive director, and my son-in-law has just been hired to be a grant director. So it really is a family foundation, and I'm just super proud of that family connection. I have my kids, they've got 5 grandkids, there's another couple in the oven. That's something obviously any father has to be proud of, and they still talk to me. And that's, that's kind of my world.
Thank you for all of your contributions. Thank you for today.
Oh, my pleasure, Carol. Thank you for your insightful questions, and I'm more than happy to be here discussing some of these stories from my own life. Thank you.
Ross Beaty, a BC legend.